Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Modern Market. This is our daily show from Monday to Friday at 7 a.m. Eastern Time, 12 p.m. BST, every day of the week, where we discuss all things to do with the modern market. That is the crypto market, the NFT market, and any other market where we might be able to make some or a lot of money on the internet. I'm your host, B-Check. I'm joined by my legendary co-host, Legendary. We're going to get into all of the headlines today in just a little bit. But before we do that, just a reminder that nothing that we say here is financial advice. This market is incredibly risky and we don't know anything for sure, unfortunately. So please do use your own judgment and exercise caution as necessary. With that out of the way, Legendary, it is Monday. It is the 10th of June. How are you doing? How are you feeling?
GM, doing quite well. Spent the weekend farming Blast and working on that Pokemon collection on the colony.
Okay.
Have been adding quite a few pieces. Added a new Charizard. Went for a Gengar. Like I'm going for the old sets, the base set, the jungle one, the gym heroes, everything that basically has that nostalgia when I was a little kid in school.
Interesting.
And I'm collecting those. But I think I will try once I have like a decent size of say 20-ish cards I like to actually go and redeem them.
It's funny that there's such a big crossover between people in NFTs slash crypto and old school gamers, Pokemon lovers, card collectors of various types. One of the interesting things for some reason is that when I was a kid, I absolutely hated all of the game stuff. Like I just had no interest in collecting the game stuff. What I did like was sport, and so I would maybe collect like stickers and those types of things. But the on the gaming side, just absolutely never captured my attention. I have no idea why. But obviously can appreciate that it is pretty interesting to a lot of people. Did you always skew that way, Legendary, towards the Pokemon stuff? What else? What else was there beforehand?
Yeah, I mean, for me it was very easy. Like I was brought up by immigrant parents, Eastern European mentality, focus on school, focus on getting good grades. You won't get a Game Boy, you won't get a PS1 or whatever. You won't have any kind of console. So the only
Yeah.
thing I could do was like collect, trade, and flip cards. And what I already liked as a kid, like was the collecting aspect, but also flipping, like just trying to get a good
Okay.
deal and trying to line up a series. If I get this, then you get that. And then this third person will allow me to swap it for this and that and like build a little chain of swaps and then execute them. Like this I very much enjoyed. Back then for me, it was like only really Pokemon. When I was like 12, 13 years old, Yu-Gi-Oh! Got added to the mix. I never leaned on the sports side of things with collectibles. I always did stick with like quote unquote the traditional TCGs.
Interesting.
Did you actually play them though? That's the question. Or
I
did you
did.
just collect?
I actually played Pokemon casually, but for Yu-Gi-Oh, I actually played
That's weird.
tournaments. Yeah.
That's really weird. No one plays. Everyone collects.
No, I actually enjoyed playing the tournaments, and I was very devastated when my dad drove me from like the little city that we were living in to Austria's capital, to Vienna, to play a bigger tournament, and I got like basically eliminated after the first two games. It was very sad, and then I was thinking maybe I should stick with the trading. So you are right, Brett. You have a good point.
Never nice to come to the reality. Go to the big city and get humbled. Stick to the flipping, stick to the JPEGs, Legendary. That is one thing, which, to be fair, you are very good at. We're going to get into all of that expertise. I don't know if we're going to be touching on the Blast stuff today, but we do have our Blast focus segment tomorrow. Today, we're going to get into the headlines, talking about Bitcoin, talking about zkSync, the next biggest airdrop on the horizon. And we're also going to talk about Arbitrum's huge gaming fund. But before we get into the bigger discussion there, let's get into all the headlines and the price action. As always, from the snapshot, which is pinned up top. If you find it brings you some value today, please do give it a like. That's on Twitter, by the way, for the people who are watching on YouTube. Starting with some price action. Crypto is fairly flat, actually, after a little bit of a flush over the weekend. Bitcoin's at 69.4K, ETH is at 3.6, Solana is at $158. The first headline, as I mentioned, Bitcoin's down to 69K, wiping $1.3 billion of open interest over the weekend. Cointelegraph reported that the largest cryptocurrency had endured sudden volatility at the prior Wall Street Open, thanks to what was labeled schizophrenic United States employment data. But I guess what broadly was happening, as they go on to describe, was that it was compounded by a rout in altcoins, which came courtesy of market reactions to a live stream by pseudonymous investor Roaring Kitty. We're going to touch on that a little bit yesterday, see if people watched that after the show on Friday. I definitely caught a decent chunk of it. GameStop stock is down from $60 to like 27 as a consequence, but we'll touch on that later. Number 2, big headline for today: Ethereum's L2 zkSync tweets pre-game starts tomorrow, suggesting that the airdrop is incoming. That's a very long awaited one. We'll touch on some of the details there that you might need to know. And 3, Arbitrum DAO votes for a $200 million gaming grant to catalyze gaming on Arbitrum. Had to include that as a headline today because of the sheer scale of it. We'll get into some of those details in a bit. Some more price action from the NFT side of things. We've got CryptoPunks at 29.5 ETH down. I don't know why it says 21% on the snapshot. It should be down a couple of percent. Bored Apes at 11.6, Mutants at 1.9, down 4%, DGods at 1.1, Captains at 3.3, Azuki's still underneath 4 at 3.9, Penguins holding the 10 ETH floor at 10.1, Mad Lads at 66 Solana, and the Nouns winning bid was at 6.6 ETH. Notable Penguin sale, we saw Penguin Gold selling for 22.99 ETH, which is pretty significant, and a Bored Ape Red hat selling for 14.98 ETH. Legendary, that is the price action. Those are the headlines. Anything catching your attention in the market before we get into the more the bigger details of the headlines?
Yeah, absolutely. If we take a look at the Mintify heat map on the ETH side of things, it's actually it's a pretty mixed day. Like there's nothing really outstanding and exciting going on, but there's a bunch of collections being down a fair bit, like the Kenpai Pandas being down 17%. Pirate Nation, the Founders Pirates, they did see a 20% correction after, after they spiked to more than 1 ETH. They are back down to 0.9 ETH. The Proto Gremlins are pumping 20%. MFers are up a couple percent, like 3%. So some collections are up, some are down, but nothing really outstanding, maybe apart from the Pandas being down 20% over the last 24 hours.
Interesting. As you say, Pandas down 20%. Pirate Nation down 20%, Sproto up 20. Seems like a bit of a sporadic day, as we kind of alluded to on the major side of things. Doesn't seem to be too much movement. We mentioned CryptoPunks sliding beneath 30. Maybe that's the biggest thing to me at the moment, Legendary, that's catching my attention. CryptoPunks on a continuous slide. Remember, they were not long ago, probably a month ago, at a 40 ETH floor. Well, before that, it even got as high as 50 something, right, recently. But they then slid to about 40 ETH floor. We're now down to 29.5. What's your thinking when it comes to CryptoPunks at the moment? How are you thinking about that basically premium blue chip asset? 2 questions. What do you think of the slide down? Do you think it has implications for the rest of the market?
Yeah, I think on the slide down, it kind of feels like Punk's OTC is more or less single-handedly defending the floor. And I'm wondering if or whether he's going to capitulate on that. I'm a bit torn. Like on the one hand, I wouldn't mind seeing him capitulate and see like the floor price really, really tank maybe towards the 20 ETH region, where I'd be like more tempted to buy a CryptoPunk. But on the other hand, 30 is also like relatively cheap for like the CryptoPunk floor price, but I don't feel tempted right now to buy it. So I'm not sure, even in the case that it slide down to 20, I'm going to like, yep, I'm going to scoop one up now. But it's like still, to me, the dilemma, how much new entrants, like the new people of this bull market, are interested in getting a punk, and what that price point is when they would like to get in. So this is probably not, I'm probably not the only person who's thinking that and who's trying to figure out if they have an entry point when they would like try to get a punk, or if they're rather sitting that one out. And I'm curious to see how the dynamic, even this one, Sold to Punks OTC that you have up on screen, how the market dynamic will play out once OTC is taking a break. This one too. Basically every punk that you get is going to be sold to Punks OTC.
Yeah,
he's
so
taking
for
a
the
break,
people who
how
are
the market
watching
will
and you
look like.
can't hear this on Spaces, but I'm just going through the CryptoPunks recent sales on screen from the CryptoPunks website. So we've had one recent one at 28 ETH sold to Punks OTC. Another one before that, 33.5 ETH sold to Punks OTC for 33.5. The one before that at 34.5 was sold not to Punks OTC, so a different buyer, thank God. The one before that was also sold to someone else. But in general, it seems to be a reasonable assumption to make that if anything gets too low, Punks OTC does usually step in. For the people who are completely unaware, Punks OTC, I've heard them refer to themselves as more than one person before. So maybe there's a fund element to them, although I don't know that perfectly. They kind of they're basically like a liquidity provider for punks. If they go too low, they just buy them, kind of defending some artificial floor, and they try to list them higher if they don't want them. But clearly that strategy is not working out, at least in ETH terms at the moment, because the floor keeps going down, they keep buying, and they're unable to sell. I know that this one, actually, this is one that Punks OTC bought. Oh, okay, this one actually managed to sell. But he sold at a loss. So he bought at 37, sold at 35.5. Initially, he'd bought at 37, tried to flip it for 42 when 37 was like a cheap price for the punk. But then the floor just kept crashing, ended up losing ETH on it. So this is obviously a strategy that can't go on forever, where you're providing liquidity, but you just keep getting hit on, losing ETH every single time. So that is definitely a challenge for the kind of that ecosystem at the moment. Legendary, one further thought I was having on this is this, wanted to hear your response to it, is that obviously people are getting more and more bullish, well, broadly crypto, but also ETH at the moment. So even though the CryptoPunk floor is tanking in ETH terms, it's still more than $100,000, which is a huge amount of money for any person to get into this. So there is a world in which it's not necessarily the case that people are bearish punks, right? It's not that they think that it's a bad asset. It's just it could, if you think ETH is going to go up a lot quickly, you think that maybe this could depreciate in ETH terms. Like that seems to be what is happening at the moment, or at least that's got to be part of the story, right? What do you think about that?
I think to me, it's an ETH native asset, right? It's the legacy of NFTs. It is priced in ETH. And I want to look at it in ETH terms, like looking at it in USD terms. Yes, of course, it's over 100K, but it's not a perspective that I think that makes sense. Because otherwise, if you say you want to like hold the USD value, then just buy a fucking stable coin. If you are bullish on punks, buy a punk. Try to see it as a leveraged long on ETH if you're bullish on them in anything. But looking at the stablecoin or at the USD fiat value perspective, I just don't find that super enticing, and especially not like with CryptoPunks.
Interesting. I think I take the other side of that. I think it's. I think that if I was a holder right now, I would be thinking this is like very, very bullish setup across various asset classes. ETH, this is probably the consensus view that everything moves up at the moment. And I think some of these things struggle to keep up with the sheer velocity of it. I mean, if you think about it, even ETH is up basically pushing towards a 2x in not a huge amount of time from the middle of last year. So that's going to have an impact on the price. And say punks were around 60, now they're around 30, seems to track for me. Got a couple of hands raised. Want to hear from Tiro on this and Funky on the CryptoPunks question. Tiro, what are your thoughts on CryptoPunks slide down?
Yeah, a couple thoughts. I think the punks are gonna start going under 100K fiat fast, but if you're looking at it as an asset class, as a store of value of ETH, if the ETH price is still going down, it's not a good store of value that's locked. There's other opportunities with that liquidity to move and make yield on. So if you want to be flexing and using it as a PFP, which many are, I think it's smart to invest in it while it's going down now, and you think it would go up later. It's a legacy NFT, so I think a lot of people are upset with what Yuga did when they acquired it from Larva Labs. Now that they have acquired it, they did this art drop with Nina, and that went poorly. It seemed from the punks holder community, they didn't feel like it represented punks well. So the sentiment is down, and a lot of people are upset. And I think if Yuga was smart, they're looking for a win. They need a win. So Garga came out after they bungled that communication, and he backtracked about 5 to 6 hours after, and now all of a sudden they need a win. So why wouldn't here's my spicy take proposal is Yuga, sell this to the community or a DAO or whatever, and just leave it alone. That's what they want. Yeah, that's what the holder sentiment is. So that's my thoughts.
It's a reasonable point to bring up the Yuga situation at the same time too, because that definitely played a factor for some people. I've actually spoken to a number of people who thought that the whole thing was actually overblown and maybe just like a very vocal minority who were like exceptionally impacted by the situation. So I just wanted to put that out there as well. Although I definitely take your point. There were definitely people who were kind of very hard on that side that you just shared too. Funky, your hand is raised. What are your thoughts here on the kind of premium crypto asset? Is there the danger that this asset, as well as others, keep going down as ETH price, when people get more and more bullish ETH?
Yeah, I mean, T-Row brought up what I was going to ask anyhow. If you guys just think it has a lot to do with how Yuga has continually fumbled the bag, not only for punks, but just for all the assets. Like when you looked at the apes, like, oh, they just won't keep sinking below 20, and they just keep going down and down and down. And I wonder if it's just the negative sentiment, but then also, like to your point, one of the guys in the kingdom, he had a punk and he finally sold it. He said, I just felt like even though I bought it for less, I'm just trying to like hang on to my ETH at this point. Yeah. So I feel like some people who have just maybe one, they might capitulate. He bought it like for 20, so he still made money on it, but he just felt like I need to save the ETH. I don't know where this is going, and I always thought this would never even dip below 40. So I think it's really surprised a lot of people.
Interesting. I think that's fair. Definitely keeping my ears open to the various perspectives here, because people will ultimately have very different opinions on this. I guess the interesting point is, Legendary, maybe we'll close on this before we hit the bigger discussion point today and the rest of the headlines. Remember, we've got the zkSync airdrop information coming. Well, the information that we have coming up. We've got a discussion on Bitcoin and the Arbitrum 200 million grant as well. But maybe one of the bigger questions for me, Legendary, is like, look, we've been in the space for a while, right? And so our perspectives are colored by our existence in the previous cycle, how we were kind of brought into this environment, and the shaped by the narratives that the people who were already here kind of inculcated us with. If you were a new person coming in now, do you think CryptoPunks would be something that you think like, oh, that's a really cool thing? Because remember, we came in when it was Lava Labs holding it, and they did Meebits, and there were all these cool people, and who were holders, and then they went up to such a huge value. Like, is there a world where these newer people coming in just don't have that history and therefore less interested? Like, do you have a perspective on that?
Yeah, I think so. I think that's a fair perspective. Like, I remember when I came in, crypto kitties were still trading, didn't care about that. Punks were super cheap, didn't care about that. I was getting into Axie Infinity because I thought it was a fun game. But like the first real mint that got me excited and that was way later. That was then the Bored Apes. The new thing that was new to me was Top Shot, when they had like the closed beta, closed alpha, whatever that was. But it's just like with, I don't know, thinking across, it's the analogy I like to make quite often across generations. The things that my parents collected are not the things that I was interested in collecting as a kid, the Pokemon cards, whatever it is. So yes, some will find the legacy fascinating and will explore that. If you think about it like as a like broader asset class, like say someone is young and gets into Pokemon today and doesn't have that like 1996 base set memories, etc., but gets into collecting and learns about the history, maybe at some point in the collecting journey, they will be enticed to pick up one of the first Charizards or the first Raichus, Turtles, whatever. Blastoise, that was the name I was fishing for. But that's only like if you have that exposure, and it also needs to be cross-brand, because it's not like you're collecting now the 20th generation of CryptoPunks. You need to extrapolate from collecting a very specific NFT that gets you into this space to wanting to collect the first NFT. And that doesn't translate in the real world, right? Not because I collected Pokemon cards, I'm not going to chase now to find out what in the human history was the first collectible card game and try to hunt down, I don't know, the first game, hunt down the first Byzantinian chess piece or chess set, because they just don't care about the brand exposure they had. So that's going to be both sides. There are going to be people who will be enticed about the history and will go for punks, and other people who just get in at a later point and will never care about punks. And I feel like both are, fair perspectives as a collector.
Interesting. Very, very interesting stuff. I think that's a very fair take. It's definitely something to think about. To what extent will like the future generations want to come to buy your bags, in essence? Definitely something to keep on the brain. Right, we've got a lot of headlines to talk about today, but the first discussion point we're going to get into before we do that is this interesting question on founders in the space. We have a lot of debates about founders, and particularly since me and Legendary have started investing in people more recently, we come across all different types of founders going about their business in different spheres in crypto. And I saw this interesting take about repeat founders. And I wondered what Legendary's take would be on it, or what everyone's take would be on this, frankly. This is by Santiago, a great investor in the space. He said, generally like backing repeat founders, even if their prior startup wasn't a huge success. Sometimes those end up being the most successful in their second or third iteration. However, it does at some point become a red flag when a founder jumps around too much. You see that a lot in crypto, and especially during bull markets. It's okay to pivot and capitalize on emerging opportunities, but you can sense when a founder is just onto another cash grab. Legendary, first question is, what's your take on this take about backing someone who is not, doing their very first project? Second question is, do you want to explain to people, take this opportunity to explain how we are actually, I guess, repeat founders, even though many people might not know that?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I like the take a lot. Like, coming from a European perspective, in Europe, or at least in Central Western Europe, we don't really have a failure culture. If someone has failed a startup, they're an idiot, they're not investable. Whereas like, I feel that was my exposure from living in the States, that failure culture looks quite different there, at least in the environment that I spent my time in, where if you failed a startup and you start again, that is actually viewed as something like more positive, because you have the experience, you won't be repeating the same mistakes. You have people speaking at universities how they like failed the first 3 startups and then made it with the 4th or 5th attempt, and that like wouldn't really fly in Austria. Very quick sidestep to Oxy's comment that you had pinned. Legendary sold his painting that was behind him to get more liquidity to farm more gold. I would love if that were true. I'm just staying in my parents' house, so hence no painting in the background, but maybe I should sell some art to have more capital to farm blast gold. Anyhow, back to the topic. So very much like the take, in terms of what we've been doing before the mono market, we've been running airdrop season, or we did run airdrop season in the past, which was very like, I don't know, 6 to 8 weeks after we met for the first time in Lisbon. What was it, 3 years ago? We were like, we have to do something. Like, we had our 4 or 5 hour long chat on society, the world, philosophy, etc., and vibe was there. We wanted to do something together, and we did found airdrop season. Like, airdrops were just getting starting back then, as an idea to kind of bring together like my expertise in airdrops and yours in teaching, and like having a structured approach to how we can create step-by-step tutorials. Put that together, decided to have like a pass that's not lifetime access, that was like back then set for a year, and have a Discord where all those people who would buy the pass come together, and we publish like weekly airdrop tutorials, step by step and guided, and try to farm all of us together. We did launch on the worst possible date in that year, where ETH dipped, I think, 18 or 20% on that very day. Nobody really bought. We were focused on product. Then we did actually get like 100-ish people in. We did extend for another year for free. We did run that for 18 months doing our weekly tutorials. People got Arbitrum, people got a lot of good airdrops in there. I still don't really think like about myself as a repeat founder because of that. But I mean, technically speaking, it's true. But the big learning, and I know that's a sentence that you would like to say, but I'm still going to steal it from you, that first time founders focus on product and second time founders focus on distribution, which is what we're like doing more now with the modern market. So in that sense, I do think it was a very, very helpful experience also for now navigating our daily spaces.
Yeah, I thought it'd be an interesting discussion to have, because I think a lot of people might not know that we did this endeavor for basically 18 months, if not slightly more. And this was maybe 2021 to the end of 2023. And basically, if you think about it, it was a failure, like in the end. But the learnings were incredible. So let me just set up what I thought some of the failures were and what I think we learned from them. First, genuinely, the market was atrocious. And actually, look, to be fair, we call it a failure, but we did like $20,000 worth of product sales in the end when ETH was at like 1K. So we actually, despite all the kind of tailwinds against us in that very, very difficult market, we did like a reasonable amount of sales. But the issue was there wasn't really an appetite once the airdrops disappeared, because we went into the bear market. Two things. One, people there was just no appetite. And also projects weren't going to do their airdrop in the bear market, as we've noticed, right? Everyone is lining up now to do their airdrop because they want to take advantage of all the liquidity, but projects weren't. 9 out of 10 projects were not. Arbitrum was actually an anomaly who did drop. Projects did not want to bring their product to market, their coins to market at that time. And the second thing that we learned is that people in crypto do not want to pay. Two things. They don't want to pay for that knowledge. And the second thing is they don't have the consistency to do the type of stuff which got me to ask Legendary, when I realized what he did to be able to get exposure to airdrops, the consistency required, the dedication. When no one else is talking about it in the timeline, you've got to kind of stay forthright and just do what you have to do. Very, very few people actually have that. So it was really difficult, as you said. And I think one of the things back then is we focused on making this niche product so good. And actually, like, it wasn't getting used by enough people to justify all the time and effort that we were putting in. And so, as you say, one of the big learnings now is we can take that information. Well, we can build. The cool thing about modern market is, I think it's actually a better fit for us anyway, in terms of our personalities and skill sets. But B, you get to build distribution at the same time as building a product. Like, distribution is the product in some way. Like, we're doing media, which is distribution. Now we can slice that up and sell it in different ways. And then if we ever do some new type of crypto product at some point in time in the future, we've already got some inbuilt distribution, which I think is just an incredible thing if you're able to do that as you kind of navigate this stuff. That's one of my key thoughts. Funky, you have your hand raised. I wonder if you have a question or comment here.
Just a quick comment. First and foremost, on behalf of everybody who listens to the modern market regularly, I want to thank you guys for persisting and just developing this product, because we all enjoy it. More importantly, just a kind of a joke. In the United States, they say that no startup fails, it just runs out of money.
Yeah, to be fair. Interestingly, sometimes though, I do think, like, maybe another reflection is, even when you don't have money, and you know that you're operating without money, because like we never raised for our first product. We didn't raise for the modern market either. We basically we just put our own money in, which we more or less got out from the modern for airdrop season. But for the modern market, we don't really, we just pay for stuff as we see as it's necessary. But so the bigger investment actually, and this is the thing that I guess people find difficult is your time. And it doesn't, on some level, you could think about it like, okay, well, if you run out of money, then the product's dead. But it's really like when you run out of morale to keep trying when something isn't quite going as you plan. And definitely during certain months doing airdrop season, when like we didn't have much traction, but we'd made this commitment to people and we'd had who'd made a financial commitment as well. It was definitely difficult to just like continue, but that's the most important thing at that point in time, to keep the trust and to keep that relationship. So definitely wanted to deliver on what we had promised, but in actual fact, I think it was a morale thing where you've got to keep forthright and keep believing in the thing that you've set out to do. Legendary, you came off mute. Did you have a final reflection before we get into the main headlines today?
Yeah, absolutely. Because I saw Tiro with a comment / question in the YouTube comments saying, marketing would love to know how you guys are navigating the customer acquisition matrix. Is that for the modern market? Is that for airdrop season? I'm going to answer it from maybe more from the modern market's perspective, because airdrop season is a thing of the past. In terms of maybe let's not say customers, let's say listeners. Like, we still, and I've always seen the modern market as like an audience first space. It's about like making that experience as educational as possible for the listeners. And the way we are tackling it is in a more strategic way now than honestly it was when it started. Like when it started, we focused on getting the processes to work, to getting the flow, to getting the repetitions in, to just getting the experience in hosting and running and doing a daily show. And now it's more about like understanding how fragmented some of the audiences are, and also how we don't have exposure to all the different topics. Like we might be super strong when it comes to Blast, when it comes to the L2 ecosystems. Bichek certainly has a shit ton of knowledge when it comes to art. I lean more on the gaming side of things, but we don't really, for example, cover ordinals that much. So on the one hand, we think, what are topics that are relevant, that are taking over the timeline, and where we just have weaknesses? Do we need more speakers there? Do we need to educate ourselves more on? Bread, for example, a wonderful addition when it came to all things around restaking, certainly has more technical knowledge on how that tech stack works than I do. So that is a wonderful fit. I'm super grateful to have him on. Just an example as a regular speaker, just thinking from that perspective. And similarly, in terms of audiences, obviously, if you look at other hosts and how they're running their shows, some of their audiences might not be as good as a fit for what we do. Some might be a good fit. Then we're thinking, how can we cross-pollinate? And just this has been like a very intuitive process in the beginning, is now starting to become more and more strategic if we just want to continue that growth or get a hockey stick growth in.
Yeah, final point for me on that, and it's something which not a lot of people think about in this space, because everyone always is thinking from I don't know, people thinking Web3 is just like, well, everything's on the internet, geography doesn't really matter. But I actually look quite a lot at the geographical side of things, and I want to try to represent better different regions. And so, yes, you've got different regions within crypto where it's like, okay, you are living on the Legendary gave this analogy yesterday when we were having a chat. You've got people living on this gaming island, obsessed about that. You've got people obsessed about farming Blast. You've got people obsessed with the Solana ecosystem. You've got people obsessed in the Ordinals ecosystem. So yes, you've got this divide and subsets there, and we want to try to cover those and have a good exposure there. But also, you've got people operating out of different regions, and obviously in real life, as you will know from attending these kind of conferences and things like that, hugely impactful when you're able to build relationships with people IRL. And I think I think one of the things that various people miss is reaching out to people on the basis of their region, thinking that they can be like a flag bearer for you in that particular place, if they are like also good at what they do and respectable and respected in their territory in that respect. And I think about that a lot. I think about crypto sometimes as, the music industry, or I know how British bands feel trying to break America. Like everyone's always trying to break America. And me and Legendary were just speaking yesterday, looking at some of the metrics. Like, even though we run at 7 a.m. Eastern time, which is incredibly early for people, I suspect on the East Coast, but like our metrics in states are great, like really, really good. It just shows the importance of the states. So I think there is that geographical side to kind of always keep on top of as well. Legendary, we want to get into the headlines now, as always. Kind of feeding on from the airdrop season chat, we used to focus on airdrops all the time. zkSync is one of the airdrops I think we were probably providing tutorials for like 2 or 3 years ago. They had this tweet. I will share it for people seeing. Not that there's a lot of information there. They had this tweet yesterday or the day before saying pre-game starts tomorrow, get some rest, notifications on. Do you want to give people a little bit of a background of what zkSync is and what people should be expecting here?
Yeah, absolutely. zkSync is a layer 2 solution, zkSync era, and it's, as the name kind of gives it away, it's not an optimistic rollup, it's a zk rollup, and they're building it on the zk code base, as opposed to something like Blast, for example, which is building on the optimistic stack. zkSync also very interesting from the perspective that they had the network upgrades. You still have zkSync era, you have zkSync Lite as chains. So from the airdrop season perspective, we I think did more than like 12 weeks of tutorials on that, like hopping around the different chains. In terms of the airdrop and in terms of what we can expect, I think Polymarket, again, the prediction markets I like to watch more and more, has increased the confidence even further on the airdrop, now at 84%, that we're going to see an airdrop by the end of the month. In terms of how zkSync is stacking up against other L2s, taking a look at L2 beat, just going to drop the link in our private chat if you want to share it. Arbitrum 1, still the biggest L2 out there, going by TVL. With 18 billion in there, followed by Base, 8 bill, followed by Optimism 7, followed by Blast with 3 billion. And then in the 8th spot, zkSync is sitting at 800 mil. I know that DeFi Llama is reporting metrics that are a bit different to that. So it is definitely, I would say, on the smaller side of things now. It used to get a lot more attention when it was young and when people were still like early on to farming, and farming or trying to farm the potential zkSync airdrop. But in case it's gonna come out before Blast, and this is me trying to think about strategically about it, in case it's gonna come out before Blast and it's gonna do really well, and people might be just looking at, and I know this is always a proxy, right? There's so much more than TVL to look at, but we'll start to look at the TVL and at the FTV. That actually might be pretty bullish from Blast. And again, I know TVL is not the only metric. There's way more to that, especially with zkSyncs and zk rollups in specifics. And I definitely know that Brett wants to talk on that. But that's basically the current state and the current thing that we know. Also, I've been hearing more and more rumors that the zkSync allocation to the community is going to be a bit more generous than some of the other L2s that we've seen. So curious to see how that will play out as well.
Interesting. Thank you so much for that summary. I think that's very, very helpful on just what zkSync is, what people might expect. Interesting take on Blast as well, how it might be used as a kind of interesting comparison factor. Brad, your hand is raised, always very knowledgeable on this the Ethereum L2s and everything going on there. What are your hopes and expectations for zkSync? Anything to come in on here?
Yeah, just some quick nerd bites on what might impact valuation. So one, I was just looking at the AVO futures market. It looks like it's trading at about 70 cents right now. We'll see. That usually like closes in on the actual price of the token come launch. So, and it's a better predictor typically than what we're seeing over on Solana, because that thing can be spoofed a little bit. So sure. Just something there. And then yeah, so just why this thing may potentially be valued a little bit higher than other chains, if you just go purely on tech. And two things. One is zk stack they are doing the exact same launch direction as Optimism and Arbitrum, in that they're coming with an SDK, just like Optimism mainnet launched, like Base was launched off it, Zora was launched off it, right? So Optimism was the main chain. They launched OP Stack, which is an SDK that other chains can launch from, so that all of the chains that launch from that are similar and can hopefully interoperate better. Same thing with Arbitrum and Orbits. zkStack is doing this, or zkSync is doing the same thing with zkStack, so other zk chains can launch based off of that. And why that's yeah, so that might increase the valuation because it's the mother chain of what will be a cluster of chains. And with zk Tech, you can have instant liquidity throughout all of them, whereas with optimistic rollups you cannot currently. So that's one of the bullish things that would come with zk and the zk ecosystem that launches from that. All of those things would have instant liquidity amongst them. So even though it is less right now as far as TVL and distribution, but that might lead to a higher valuation because it is novel tech.
That is a very interesting addition, Brad. Thank you for that. One follow-up question from me is, you said it was trading at 70 cents on pre-market. What type of FDV does that bring it out to, roughly?
I don't have the token calculation, so I can't extrapolate that, okay, unfortunately.
No worries. Well, we're going to maybe have a look at that in the next couple of days anyway. We'll see what the actual announcement is when it comes out, and then we'll probably report on it again, because this should be expected to be a very healthy airdrop for people. So always want to keep on top of those types of things. Legendary, unless there's anything else on that, should we move on?
One point maybe on the FTV. You said 70 cents, Brad?
Yeah, that's currently what it's trading at on Avo.
It's saying 21 billion max supply, so 50 cents would have implied an FTV of almost 10 bill. Let's quickly run the math on that. And 70 divided by 50 times 9.87, that would be an implied FTV of $14 billion.
Okay, so and then maybe
so juicy for Blast. Gold over $10.
The thing is, you want to apply some type of healthy discount to the fact it's a pre-market.
No, we don't want that. We don't want a healthy discount. We want a healthy pump. So the Blast Gold airdrop can pump. No, I know we have to watch this metrics on both Avo and Wells Market carefully. But as Brett said, I think we've also seen that with Pixelmon, that once we get like super close to the TGE now with the like latest launches, we actually get a pretty good picture. We've been getting a pretty good picture of what TGE.
Oh, Legendary, you have cut out. Legendary is frozen.
If he's still dead, he's just saying that the price typically converges as you approach the TGE. At least that's what's going on with the Avo markets typically.
Perfect. Oh, Legendary, you're back. you went.
Oh yeah, I'm back. Sorry,
you cut
I don't know what the last thing was.
Basically, price converges. Price converges as we get closer to TG.
Yes.
Thanks for filling in there, Brad. Brad was on the same wavelength. He finished your point for you. Don't worry about it. Okay, let's get into the next news. We have the next headline, which is Arbitrum DAO. This is colossal, really, if you think about it in terms of scale. Arbitrum has announced that they've dedicated $220 million for the gaming ecosystem. Remember, Arbitrum's a DAO, so you need to put these proposals forward and they need to vote on it. It looks like this vote has passed. These are the details of this vote and deal. On June the 7th, the Arbitrum community approved a proposal to boost the gaming ecosystem with support from the Arbitrum Foundation. This initiative will distribute 225 million ARB tokens worth about $222 million over 3 years through the newly established Gaming Catalyst program. According to Arbitrum, the global gaming market would be worth $190 billion by 2025. The GPP, which is that Gaming Catalyst program, will offer grants up to $483,000 for new and early stage developers. That sounds like each grant could be up to almost $500,000. Established studios can apply for larger investments, which may include value sharing components like tokens or equity. The initiative aims to attract 200 to 300 developer applications and ensure over 20% of Web3 games use Arbitrum, launch 25 new orbits, and achieve the highest net migrations among Layer 2 networks. Pretty huge information here, Legendary. So you've got grants which are up to $500,000, which actually in reality maybe it's not that much for individual games, but I'd love to hear your thoughts on that. And then this intention to get 20% of Web3 games going to Arbitrum. So a clear desire for Arbitrum to become an L2, which is the leader or a leader in Web3 gaming. What's your response to this quite large fund?
Yeah, absolutely. Just apologies for my internet. We are in a thunderstorm now, and internet has dropped out. So I'm joining on hotspot and hope that works somewhat fine. In terms of the grant program for the gaming ecosystem, a couple of thoughts on that. So first of all, I've been talking to a lot of gaming founders, and it seems that a lot of them are thinking very intensely about what L3 solution is interesting to them, what L3 stack they want to use, they want to have, as Brett has explained, they want to have like their own chain on Arbitrum stack, on the OP stack, on whatever stack they want to build, and have still that like interchain operability within like their own SDK, their own tech stack. And grants play a huge role in that, obviously. Like there's 3 points. One thing is a grant program. The second thing is culture and attention. Is Arbitrum getting a lot of attention? Is it being fudded? Is Polygon being fudded? Yes, it's being fudded. And the third thing, obviously, is the technical specifics, the capabilities of the stack that you're building on. And Arbitrum has been generous with its grants from what I've been seeing in the background with the games that have been building on that. And to me, it just shows that they are doubling down on that they are confident in the L3 capabilities that they have. And I get it if the timing might appear a bit off for some people, because the gaming hype is not as like active or as strong as it used to be. But again, they've been running that in the background. They've been giving out grants, right? And I just don't think that gaming is dead, even if we see a bit of a lull right now. Gaming also, games take a lot of time to build. So it just seems a logical continuation of what they've already been doing.
Okay, I think that's pretty fair. Brad, your hand is raised. Definitely want to bring you in on this. What do you think of the 200 million fund for gaming on Arbitrum?
I don't have any strong personal thoughts, but just to give you guys insight on, because there's actually a lot of drama around this in the old school heads, because old school heads being the people that have been in old guard of Ethereum, and Arbitrum has been giving out a shit ton of grants the last year or so. They just had something called the short-term incentives program, which they gave out like another 50 million in tokens to like 30 projects, and it's been they've been pretty heavily beaten over the head, because like if you look at Arbitrum's price, it's down only for a considerable time now. Peaked at 225, now down to about a cent or about $1. And everyone's just saying, you're giving out all this money to all these things as incentives. Everyone buys it, they dump it, and price is just down only. So it's starting to scare people that, yes, you just keep incentivizing people with this token and basically just continue to dilute and give it in the hands of people who are instantly going to sell, because the tracking and actually ensuring that the people that get this money use it wisely is pretty hard to do. So there's just a lot of consternation in the ecosystem about how often they continually give out these grants. And they do give out in sizable things.
Yeah, two really, really good points there for me. The first is around the price action, as you noted. And the thing is, it's justified, right? Like if you do apply for a grant and someone says, well, we're going to give it to you in tokens, well, it is reasonable to say, well, actually, we kind of need dollars to pay the people that are doing all this stuff. So it's like, well, ultimately, we're going to sell this token. So definitely important to know that is what's happening. And as I've pulled up the chart for the people who are watching in, as you can see, it's like not a pretty picture over the last maybe 6 months, or actually even over the last month. But it was as high at the top of the year. Arbitrum hit 230, now down to $1. So a lot of selling going on. So that's an interesting point to recognize. I can't remember my second point, so we'll have to leave that one there. But very helpful context on what's going on at Arbitrum. Let's hit the Web3 roundup to get up to speed with everything else that's been happening in the space.
One final thought on that.
Go on.
It's kind of like a loss leading strategy at the end, right? You do accept that the token is going to dump because the grantees will dump it to finance their games or finance their projects, and you hope that the user retention that comes with the success of those projects will ultimately help pump the token price over the midterm.
Yeah, I think that's fair. That's a reasonable take.
That's the hope for sure. Whether or not it does, yeah.
Yeah. Oh, the second point I was going to make, Brad, which that kind of alluded me to, is that in the end, when it comes to the distribution of a large amount of funds, people are going to get unhappy. We've seen it with all kind of DAO structures, perhaps seeing it happen with the Ape Coin DAO, we're seeing it happen with these big L2 DAOs. People will come with inflated proposals, hoping that they can just get the votes, right? Because in the end, there are certain voters who hold huge amounts of votes. If you can win those people over, you might just be able to win, you know, a very, very lucrative deal for yourself. Now, in the end, that's just business, right? Like, you take your proposal to any person, you name your price, and you have to get a group of people to accept. But just in this environment where people are, well, you have the intention, which is that is meant to be some DAO governed process, but in reality, you have a few voters who have huge amounts of votes, and so people will always get upset about these instances of large amounts going to individual parties. That was the second point I wanted to make, which is interesting to know about the dynamics of DAOs. But look, we just got a few more minutes. We want to close off on a bit more general points about crypto, but we'll just hit the Web3 roundup to get you up to speed with everything else first that's been happening over the weekend. As always, it's from the snapshot, which is pinned up top. First, Solana does more volume than ETH and BNB combined with the latest meme coin Frenzy. I thought that was important to bring out if we weren't aware of that already. Number two, Iggy Azalea announced his telecommunications company will facilitate phones that can be purchased with Mother Token. She is genuinely trying to integrate this token into various things that she is doing. Next, IronNet CEO steps down 2 days before token launch to prevent from distractions about his past. I don't know what the perfect details were there, but seems interesting to have to. Well, seems not great to have to step down just before your token's going live. Next, YOLO Games announces coin launch this week and a raise for investors. Next, GameStop share price tanks after Roaring Kitty stream on Friday. It went from $60 to $28. Andrew Tate tweets a pudgy penguin gif of Time to Cook, and there was a bunch of huge celebrities, including Donald Trump Jr. and someone else, a bunch of other celebs, on a space held by formerly NFT god Alex Finn over the weekend. I think it did numbers. And finally, Grant Yun signs a contract with the US Department of State to have art in embassies. I thought that was a nice art piece of news for everyone as we kind of draw to a close today. But Legendary, the final headline for today was about Bitcoin. Bitcoin's down to 69K, wiping $1.3 billion of open interest over the weekend. Some people were linking this to kind of US general market stuff versus the Roaring Kitty stream on Friday, which sent GME spiraling down. GME was at about $60-ish or more than that, and is now down to sub 30. Is that what's kind of crushing the market at the moment? How are you thinking about things?
Could have an impact. The way I'm still thinking about it is something we discussed on last week's show. I can't remember the day. We're looking at BTC ETF inflows on the one hand and seeing, okay, inflows are actually quite strong, but price isn't moving up too strongly. And also going through that post by Mando, where he kind of explained that delta neutral strategy, which some of the institutional players are taking, where they're going long BTC spot and shorting the futures, and just of that price difference, profiting off that price difference, and also farming positive funding rates. And I just think that in a setup like that, it is not uncommon to see leverage getting flushed out over and over and over once we get a bit more over leveraged. Although this time leverage wasn't like that we weren't that strongly over leveraged as the last time. I think it was like 3 to 4 weeks ago when we saw a bit of a like more drastical correction. But overall, not really worried about the market right now, not worried about Roaring Kitty and whatever he is doing on his end, driving down cryptocurrency prices. So I am very, very relaxed when it comes to that price action.
Yeah, I think that's fair. Fair take for sure. I wanted to throw to Bread though, just to get his perspective on just general stuff at the moment. We're obviously moving into the summer if we're not there already. How do you see things playing out over the summer, Bread? Are people just chopping themselves up? I'm just reading this tweet from Ovi at the moment where he's saying, I do feel the timeline has got extremely impatient and people are blowing themselves up on leverage or chasing the 69th iteration of a meme coin. Feels like we're just ranging and people are kind of losing their minds about it. That's like my general observation. Brett, do you have a sense of where crypto is heading for the next couple of months, how people are responding to it?
Yeah, I mean, I tend to agree. I mean, so like I'm not a short-term trader, right? I'm not flipping out
Sure.
in and out of stuff daily, weekly, whatever. So in my mind, I look at structural changes, and structurally, I don't understand how anyone could be anything but excited right now, right? We have one ETF already approved and seeing crazy inflows. We have another ETF approved and getting ready to be approved for trading here once the new forms are approved, or saying what early next month is the guess there. Like there's just now we're starting to see celebrities start to get engaged and stuff. You're starting to actually use this stuff. I get like in my mind, yeah, I'm just sitting here chilling. I think everyone is just getting bored and they are chopping themselves up in some sideways movement because it does take time for this stuff to play out. But structurally, like there's just so many catalysts ahead of us, especially now with the election coming and everyone starting to even incorporate that into your political strategy. Like there's just so much big stuff there. And yeah, let's get out of there. Let's wrap it up. But yeah, it's there's so much structural stuff that like yeah, don't chop yourselves up and let it roll.
Sorry, I was just setting it up, Brad. No, I actually completely agree with you. I think yeah, people are really chopping themselves up a lot, and just requires a bit of patience, as you said, structurally, politically. There just seems to be all these kind of tailwinds which are ready to assist if you are willing to accept their assistance, but it does require some patience. As Todd Tiro said in the YouTube comments, people are bored and want to gamble. I think that's definitely true. And SF10 as well, just saying people are desperate for real. And to a point we were making the other day about inflation and stuff like that, people might say that it's under control or whatever, but I'm just not convinced that it is. And I think people do feel that they need to take exceptional risk in order to keep up with either the inflation that people are trying to cover up, or there's just this element of needing to be more risk on than is probably healthy, especially when everything seems to be on the cusp of going up. And again, we don't know which direction things are going to go at any point in time, short term, medium term, or long. But if you've been here for a while, it feels like things are kind of coalescing into a nice situation.
Yeah, and I will say I am positioning myself that way too. Like earlier in this year, I was leveraging up on points and doing a lot of the Pendle YT shit and like really like sacrificing my ETH position so that I could go multiples on derivatives, which is yield, right? It was, points. Now I am consolidating from those things into fixed yield in the major assets, so BTC, ETH, whatever. A lot of those things, even in your stablecoins, USDE with the synthetic dollar of Athena, you can get fixed APR of 70% right now because everyone is still leveraging up on points. But I think the majors carry us for a little bit longer, and I'm just going to ride them. So I'm just sitting on them, sacrificing that yield, start going away from the yield into the majors and riding up the fixed guarantee stuff for the next few months while everyone else just kind of chops themselves up.
Interesting take. I've been doing something similar as well. Maybe we'll do a little bit of a segment on how we are doing those types of things in the next few days. But guys, that is the end of our show. Appreciate you for joining us as always. Thank you to my legendary co-host, Legendary, for joining. Thank you to our excellent contributors, Bread, Oxy, Tiro, and Funky up on stage with us. And thank you all in the audience for being with us. Remember, we do this every single day, Monday to Friday, 7 a.m. Eastern time. We do it for an hour. We're live on X. We're live on YouTube. You can catch us on Spotify and Apple Podcasts if that is where you live as well. Hope you have a wonderful day. We will, of course, be back again with you tomorrow. Take care and have a good day. Bye-bye.